So it's been around 7 years since the Lightning white paper was written, and around 5 years since the Lightning Network went live with its first few Lightning nodes. So let's check up on the state of the Lightning Network by diving into a report on Lightning by River, the US exchange. Let's find out if Lightning is dead, if it's a failed project, if no one's using it anymore, and if it's insecure and unable to securely route people's payments. So first of all, where can you view or access this report? Well, if you go to river.com and then scroll down to the bottom, there are a bunch of reports that River Research have written, and we're going to be looking into this one. The Lightning Network grew by 1,000% in 2 years. So, a quick note on River. So River are US based, they're Bitcoin only, they're working on some of Bitcoin's most recent innovations in a way that some of the longer standing shitcoin casinos just aren't. So there's a lot to like about River, and certainly if you're US based, then yeah, check them out. So let's dive into this report. So the headline figure is Lightning Network grew by 1,000% in 2 years, but let's examine some of the statistics that River have collected to understand at a deeper level how the Lightning Network is performing and functioning. So it's worth noting to start with that the nature of the Lightning Network means that it's impossible to understand the full extent of activity on the Lightning Network. For this report, River was able to collaborate with 52% of the capacity on the Lightning Network. They have a list of some of the companies here that shared Lightning data. So in comparison to, say, on-chain, where all transactions are public and broadcast and indexed, on Lightning Network there are payments that are going over certain routes where the vast majority of the Lightning Network just doesn't see those payments. And in the extreme case, there are private channels where most of the Lightning Network doesn't even know that those Lightning channels exist. So it is a different animal to looking at on-chain statistics. But as River's saying in its report, it's important to understand how Lightning is evolving for various reasons. People will dedicate time, money, investment if they see something that's growing and performing well, versus if they listen to the FUD and think, oh, the protocol's broken or unused, and perhaps they think they should allocate their time and money elsewhere. So 50% of the capacity on the Lightning Network, and River estimate that that's a lower bound of 6 million routed Lightning transactions in August 2023. As I explained earlier, that's just a lower bound. For the upper bounds, it's pure speculation. The headline figure that we talked about, the 1,000% increase, so that's a comparison from August 2021 to August 2023. And in this period, there was a 44% Bitcoin price drop and a 45% decrease in search interest. So Bitcoin is highly cyclical. Anyone who's been around in Bitcoin for a while will know that there's bull markets and there's bear markets. During the bull markets, everyone goes crazy about Bitcoin, and people who have never even really looked at it start buying it, and alternatives to Bitcoin. But during those bear markets, it's really where the people who are fully invested in Bitcoin stick around, continue to work, continue to learn about how Bitcoin operates, and yeah, that's when the businesses do their most effective building out of infrastructure and products and services. There's less noise and easier to keep your head down and prepare for the next bull market. So this figure of Lightning transactions, it's the equivalent of 2.5 transactions per second, and that compares to an on-chain average of 4.4 transactions per second. So transaction throughput, at least if you're comparing that lower bound of Lightning transactions, is still higher on chain. And this is really where fees are going to start to dictate whether people are forced to use Lightning or not. In a world where fees are going up to, I don't know, $20, $50 a transaction, you're certainly going to want to use off-chain protocols if you're sending, let's say, $100 using Bitcoin if the transaction fee is $50, say, right? So certainly in a high fee world, you would expect the transaction throughput on Lightning to be a much higher multiple of the transaction throughput on chain. But for now, it does seem, at least using that lower bound figure, that there's more transaction throughput on chain. Now, it's interesting that River estimate that most of the transaction growth is gaming, social media tipping. So presumably that's things like Nostra that is integrating a Lightning-like experience to decentralized social media and streaming. In terms of a dollar figure, River estimate that $78 million was publicly routed over the Lightning Network, and that the average transaction was around $12. So yeah, in a world where fees can go and have recently gone, and when I'm speaking in January 2024, they have recently gone up to $10, $20 a transaction. So yeah, it just doesn't make sense to attempt to try and send $11 on chain. You're going to be forced to have to use Lightning or an off-chain protocol. What else does it say here? There's some stats on Lightning companies. So $500 million was raised by Lightning companies between 2018 and 2022. And this is a really interesting one. So yeah, people talk down Lightning a lot, and Lightning is not perfect, right? It doesn't offer the same security as on-chain. It's just a fact. On-chain, you can have Bitcoin sent to an address and you can forget about it for 10 years as long as you keep the keys secure. With Lightning and the interactivity and the security model of needing to send an on-chain transaction when things go wrong, there's just more complexity, and you just can't avoid more complexity and slightly weaker security guarantees when you're moving away from just sending on-chain transactions. It's just unavoidable. So the fact that River's Lightning payment success rate was 99.7% in August 2023 is extremely impressive, almost worryingly impressive. That does sound such a high percentage that perhaps the Lightning Network is more centralized at this point than I perhaps envisaged. So yeah, I mean, it's just it's much easier to get a high payment success rate when you have a small number of very, very large, well-funded nodes at the center of the network that are effectively doing all the work. If you want a more decentralized network and more hobbyists taking some of the chunk of those routing fees, then yeah, you would expect that payment success rate to be lower. But the flip side is having a very high success rate is also a good thing, right? If you're trying to send a Lightning payment, you want it to succeed. So yeah, double-edged sword there perhaps, but congratulations to River on such a high success rate. So the primary reasons for failure that they identified of when no payment route can be found that has enough liquidity, and when a non-custodial wallet user, effectively a Lightning node, is offline. So yeah, you can't send a payment to a Lightning node if they're offline, and unlike on-chain or some other off-chain protocols like Liquid and sidechains, liquidity is a big challenge with Lightning. If there isn't a route of channels with a sufficiently high capacity, then a Lightning payment can't be sent, and you really need to send an on-chain transaction in that case. So yeah, I think those are the headline figures. I suppose I'll just end by re-emphasizing that point that Lightning statistics are not going to be entirely accurate or encompass all the activity on that network using the protocol. River have this diagram where there's the routed transactions part, which is a subset of direct transactions and a subset of private transactions. So you have the routed transactions, so this is where only the participants in the route get to know of a certain payment. You have direct transactions where there's not even a route, so only the sender and the receiver learn about that transaction. And then there's entirely private transactions where no one perhaps even knows that those nodes or channels exist. So yeah, you're certainly, when you're analyzing the Lightning Network, you're partially blindfolded to what's going on, in a way that you aren't blindfolded on chain. Like a lot of people would argue that's a good thing. It shows greater privacy than on chain, but it does ensure you have a hand tied behind your back when you're trying to understand, okay, well, are people using this thing? Is it useful? Is it growing? Should I spend more of my time and investment looking into this thing? So yeah, great work, River. Big fan of this kind of stuff from their research department. And yeah, perhaps we'll look into some of their other reports and other videos.